podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Hi everyone, first of our summer bonus editions. I'm talking to Andy Green. You may know him from years past as Anders Red, the football finance blogger. How's it going, Andy?
Yeah, very good, thanks, Ed. Nice to see you.
Yeah, you too. Yeah, we used to meet up at a sort of Manchester United fans group thing a decade ago or something like that.
Yeah, something like when we were young.
When we were young, neither of us young, and we now no longer live in the same country, let alone the same city. But, you know, what is old is new again, isn't it? And looking at United's finances, as much changed in this past decade. It's got bigger, but so has the debt, apparently. Amazing stuff.
Yeah, actually, the debt hasn't gone up much in the last decade, but it certainly hasn't gone down. It's there. It's like death and taxes. It's always with us. And it's still sitting there costing all this money every single year.
For all the pontificating about, when they sell off shares, will they pay down some of that debt? Just looking at the recent-ish accounts, it was 596 million gross, minus the cash.
Yes.
So 500 million pounds of debt. Lovely stuff, that.
Yeah, and it's part of the way they run the club. Obviously, they've decided that this is a tolerable amount for them, and they're happy to run with it. And I suppose that hasn't really mattered for the last few years. It hasn't been the problem.
Yep.
But it could well be the problem this summer because, as everyone knows, they need to massively rebuild the squad. Then they need to rebuild the stadium, and you do wonder where the money for all that's going to come from.
Well, it's interesting. Joel Glazer's been at the Fans Forum a few times since last summer's postponement against Liverpool. I wonder why. He's suddenly very interested to talk to people and has talked a lot about rebuilding Carrington and investments in Old Trafford. And there's stuff leaking about rebuilding Old Trafford and investment in the squad and all that kind of stuff. But then you look at United's sort of post-pandemic recovery and it looks challenging, I'd say, that United are going to be able to find the cash for all that kind of stuff.
Well, I think Ralf Rangnick said maybe 10 new players,
Yeah.
by which I assume he means sort of proper first team contenders. And you sort of put any sort of sensible number on that. What's an average fee? 40 million, 30 million?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
So 300, 400 gross before any sales. I mean, that sounds very, very ambitious. Even if it was possible from a sporting point of view, which of course it probably isn't, It would be very, very challenging. I think on the stadium, that's where a sensible club that isn't already up to its eyeballs in debt would obviously borrow. That's what it's good borrowing, isn't it? Good borrowing for the next 20, 30 years, which is what Spurs did. Obviously, I haven't been there, but one of our few good games this season, wasn't it? But we've got that extra challenge. United's got that extra challenge. If it wants to spend 100 million, 200 million on redoing Old Trafford, then that has to be borrowed essentially, because there isn't the cash flow in the business.
Yeah, it's interesting looking at both Real Madrid and Barcelona obviously borrowing heavily to revamp Bernabeu and Camp Nou, so they obviously see it as a legitimate investment for them. I'm not quite sure how Barcelona are pulling that one off, given their debt's 3 times ours.
Yeah, they're probably in even bigger trouble, aren't they? I mean, over the last 10 years, the capital expenditure that the club's made is 148 million over 10 years.
Right.
So, I mean, that's absolutely tiny. Obviously, a lot of that went on the expansion of the disabled section, obviously, which is a good thing. A good thing had to happen, and the refurbishment of some corporate boxes, maybe a few quid on the rail seats in J Stand last season. But yeah, it's a hugely underinvested stadium as everyone who goes there knows. I love the fact that they're very keen this season. If you've got a leak above you, let the club know straight away, and they'll patch that bit of the roof.
They've appointed someone who's in charge of that. Yeah,
that's right.
leak liaison officer or whatever he's called.
Yeah, that's right, which is a lovely touch, but it rather reflects on the sorry state of the place.
I did see in many of Ten Hag's sort of photo shoot out on Old Trafford pitch just how mouldy the roof is in the background of all those shots. I was like, you need to clean that up. Bit of photoshopping. So in the recent account, obviously United are still recovering from the pandemic, and it looks like, I mean, if you take these are 9-month accounts rather than the full year, but if you take the position there, it looks like United won't have fully recovered to sort of 2019 levels this season, something like that. Revenues won't be quite as big as they were. Profit, well, United made a loss. Look like they'll make a big loss this year. It's kind of troubling picture.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously it's affected by which competition you're in, which year, how many home games there are, how good the cup runs are, and so on. But no, I mean, I think you're right that they're not recovered there yet. You've got the worst possible worlds, haven't you? Which is your revenues haven't recovered fully, and your costs, which is obviously mainly wages, have gone up very considerably. And it was interesting that the wage bill for those 9 months you're talking about was almost £50 million higher than the same 9 months a year before.
Wonder who could have caused that?
Yeah, exactly. What could have happened? Well, it's two things, isn't it? First of all, we did qualify for the Champions League, having been in the Europa last year, although it seems like a bit of a distant memory, doesn't it? Champions League football. But so everyone gets a bonus, everyone gets paid more for Champions League football, and then yes, Sancho over and obviously CR7. So yeah, it's if you spend all that money and then you underperform in the season you're spending all that money, the next season is not going to be any better. I mean, it'll adjust a bit down because they'll take a wage cut for not qualifying for Champions League again.
Yeah,
but I suppose my main concern with the finances is it's the old thing about fixing the roof, no pun intended, while the sun shines. So this is a rainy day for Manchester United, isn't it? We need this massive rebuilding. And, the club will probably make 100 million of what's called EBITDA, cash profits this year, but then it will spend its usual 40 million or so on interest. It'll pay some tax, which is obviously right and proper, and it'll pay these dividends. And it's not going to generate very much cash after that, pre-transfers.
Well, quite, yeah. £33 million of dividends this year, which is up, but I guess it was only 11 last year, so they're just making up for the dividend they didn't take. Yeah,
that's right. Right.
Nice lads, those Glazers. Yeah.
Yeah, no other major football club in Europe pays dividends to its owners. I mean, it's
160 odd million over the last 5-6 years.
Absolutely. And again in a good year in inverted commas, then maybe it's not the end of the world. But when you need everything you can get, then it's hard. Which means, so if you can't borrow it, you're not generating the cash yourself. Then you're into talking about player sales and getting money in that way, aren't you?
Yeah.
So in and out in the same window.
It's very hard to make a really positive case, isn't it? Given that the wages are double. I was shocked when I saw that. Average wage at Manchester United is now £180,000 a week. Average wage. And that's double what it was when Fergie left. Yeah. And talking about paying people to fail.
No rational person would go into football. It's the wage inflation is absolutely endemic. It's built into the structure of the system, isn't it? And it's not going to be helped by, I don't know, Newcastle being owned by Saudi Arabia Sovereign Wealth Fund. There's another pot of infinite money coming over the horizon to bid up wages. Look at the Mbappe deal with PSG. I mean, insanity squared.
Yeah.
So all those trends, all those things that led in some ways to the particularly American owners wanting to do the European Super League and try to keep a lid on costs. The European Super League is a terrible way to do it, but you can understand their mentality sitting behind that.
Well, it was interesting. Yeah, of course, I think that was probably part of the European Super League that people didn't comment on mostly. It wasn't, it was a closed shop, and of course everyone reacted badly to that, and they could sell their own TV rights, at least for part of the European Super League season, which was a big revenue boost, but it had all these provisions in there to restrict wages and cap wages and restrict sales between the Super League clubs and all of this kind of stuff to drive down the costs.
or at least stop them going up. I mean, it's interesting if you look at United's results as they put out to the New York Stock Exchange last week on Treble Day, actually on the 26th of May. They put in their commentary on the industry developments and governance, UEFA financial sustainability rules effective July 2022, which will ultimately, and that's we're doing a lot of heavy lifting here, ultimately include a 70% cap on men's squad costs.
Yeah.
And so they're still hoping, I'm sure Fenwick are hoping the same. I'm sure Chelsea's new owners are thinking the same as well. They're still hoping UEFA is going to come and sort of calm the market down for them. Yeah. But obviously financial fair play, which has been with us for more than a decade now, hasn't done any such thing, has it? So
well, it's I think Mbappe, obviously money doesn't really mean anything to Qatar, at least in the scale of things when we're talking about a football club. I mean, I think we're assuming as football fans these numbers are astronomical, but really in terms of a state they're not. So they could throw anything they want. But I do think it's part of the strategy just to drive the market up, because there's no limit really, and we'll see whether that 70% cap, so it's 70% of turnover in wages and transfer fees, right, minus all the usual costs, right? So
exactly.
It's financial fair play in a slightly different formatting.
But will it be enforced? I mean, I don't want to say anything that might get City's lawyers knocking on my door or your door, Ed. But it's interesting with that City case that one of the reasons that they got off was they were beyond the statute of limitations on when these offences were meant to happen. Lots of us read those leaked emails that came out in the German media and led to that case. There are lots of loopholes and ways to wander through the financial fair play regulations. It seems a strange coincidence, doesn't it, that City's major sponsors are all owned by the same family that owns the club. I mean,
it's remarkable fortune there, I'd say.
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, if you're a cynic, but we're not. So yeah.
But we're not. UEFA hasn't shown the teeth or organisation or nous to clamp down on this stuff so far, and I can't see that changing in the future. Which means clubs like United and Liverpool.
Yeah.
And I think actually that looking at those two clubs together and looking at how far apart we are on the pitch, despite the fact that in some ways we've got very similar financial constraints. Their ground was tired and outdated, and they had to put money in to expand it, obviously. And they've gone through a long period, much to our joy, of lack of success. I mean, a few cups on the way, of course, but no league success. And they've done a pretty good job, haven't they? I mean, painful though it is to say, at the same time that we've been travelling on a downwards trajectory, they've been on the way up. So the reason I'm slightly optimistic is because of that. So how have they managed to do that? Well, this strays outside my financial area, but it seems to me good club organisation, good organisational management within the football club at all levels, director of football, recruitment, youth, all the whole thing, and a really good coach who can then build something around him that's sustainable and works and has longevity and so on and so forth. So the reason I'm slightly optimistic is I think if for all United's problems, if Ten, and I wouldn't claim to know a great deal about Dutch football, but he seems to come with a good pedigree. If he can do the similar thing that Klopp has done at Liverpool, they're on a budget too. They haven't got oil money to spend.
But yeah, and it requires the structure around him to be smart enough for Murtaugh and Fletcher and Murtaugh's team and the new head of analytics when they come in, the new head of scouting when they come in to all.
Well, it's a new head of everything. It's a new head of everything, isn't it? It's everyone's new. Everyone's new, and I suppose that could be a massive jolt in the arm and a huge, or it could be a disaster, or it could be somewhere in between.
Well, my old stakeholders who I was, management consultant with, basically, if that was happening at a business, a stock market listed business anywhere, you'd say there's a whole bunch of red flags there. You'd be really worried about the performance of the business if it was doing that, but it can't get much worse.
No, I was going to say, you're coming from such a low base, and obviously you do get, in quoted companies, quite often you do get a sort of nice little long knives where the chief exec goes and then the finance director's out 6 weeks later, and then the new chief exec and chairman come in and they fire the sales director and turn it around. Yeah, it's not without risk, but as you say, we're at rock bottom at the moment, aren't we? So how can it get worse?
Well, I guess the question, coming back to your point, is if United were smart enough, if the Glazers were smart enough and said, hey, look, there's a model for sound performance of a commercially run club, but sound performance in which you can do well and your sponsorship revenue, TV revenue and match day revenue all goes up and the asset value grows, right? So there's a model there that can be followed. We don't have any evidence that the Glazers will do that. So apart from being leeches that suck all this money out of the club, 855 million in interest paid and hundreds of millions in dividends paid, that it doesn't look like they will ever become smart owners, but maybe they will, and that's the hope.
I'm slightly more optimistic because they're not succeeding, are they, at the moment? Their asset value isn't going up.
Share price ever, I was looking at $12
exactly.
something.
Yeah, exactly. So they're back below the IPO price of an IPO that took place 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And okay, the stock market is off a bit in the last 6 months, but it's obviously, if you put your money in the index and put your money in United shares, obviously one would have done far better. So they haven't got it right. They're not stupid. They might not be the nicest people, but they're not stupid people, and they must realise they've done something wrong, and they have done something wrong. What have they done wrong? They completely failed to plan properly for Fergie's retirement, which everyone knew was coming. They appointed a financial guy, someone like me, in the form of to a.
Frankly, Andy, I trust you far more to run the club than Ed Woodward.
I was waiting for the call, Ed. I was waiting for the call, but it never came for some reason. Yeah, so they appointed somebody who didn't know anything about football. I mean, fine, you make him the head guy, but he needs a football guy underneath him, and he never had that, and then gone through this. I mean, you can't. I was going to say you can't criticise them for not spending money. They have spent a lot of the club's money. Yeah, of course they spent £1 billion on interest and dividends, which is a tragic waste. And just think what we could have if we'd had that money. But they still spent another £1 billion
on transfers.
Transfers to get precisely nowhere, to have the sort of poorest return in silverware since the 70s. So because they're not fundamentally stupid, they must realise that didn't work, and they're trying something else, aren't they? And that's one of the things I don't know Richard Arnold, but someone who does said the good thing about him is he knows what he doesn't know. Yeah. And I think Woodward didn't know what he didn't know, or knew he didn't know it, but thought he could sort of learn it on the job or stick his beak in and work it out. And so hopefully the current leadership team, from Richard Arnold downwards, will be left to sort of try to build this structure. And the fact that just down the road, down the East Lancs Road, is this model of this really frustrating model that tries to be nuts in the form of Liverpool at the moment. Shows what you can do.
Well, it does, and I do think the best CEOs, having known many over the years, are those that set a vision, like a really strong one. This is our North Star. This is where we're going as an institution. And for Manchester United, that has to be success on the pitch, because it still does fundamental driver of revenues. Yeah. And then delegate authority to competent people in the key positions in the structure you decide, right? And all of that has gone wrong over the last 10 years. We didn't have a CEO with any vision other than we can make money without being successful. Literally said it, Ed Woodward, on one of the calls. And then didn't have competent people. In fact, appeared to believe he was the most competent. This kind of Putinism of, I know how to structure a war. I know how to lead this and do all the transfers myself. Sorry, it's an unfair comparison, but maybe not.
No, but I think it may be an unfair comparison, but that's exactly what he thought, isn't it? He thought he could, and he had these strange ideas. Northcroft in the Sunday Times yesterday writing about, I hadn't heard this idea before, having a fat squad, which doesn't mean old Ronaldo. It means a big squad across all
with
positions,
high asset values,
asset value on long-term contracts. And United fans have spent the last goodness knows how many years every summer going, oh, we haven't signed anyone in this key position. Oh, but look, we just extended Phil Jones's contract again, or whoever it is. Pick your favourite out of favour, never going to get on the pitch player. So bizarre ideas that I think anyone with a football brain would have avoided. But go back to your point about success on the pitch leads to increasing revenues. It's also true that a prolonged period of lack of success on the pitch will depress your revenues. And I don't think United's appeal in the post-Fergie years, from his retirement, for the first 2 or 3 years, Moyes, Van Gaal, yeah, okay, it was very poor on the pitch, but the glory was so recent. Champions League finals were so recent, and obviously the 20th league, that it didn't really matter because it was going to come back. It was going to come back, wasn't it? Any moment. And if you're a sponsor, if you're the famous Thai noodle sponsor, whatever it is, you're buying that. And now it's quite a long time now. And Arsenal have a similar thing. When was their glory years are firmly in the 1990s, aren't they?
Well, we see some of that in the finances, don't we? The Team Viewer deal was quite a bit lower, than £15 million lower than the Chevrolet deal, although the Tezos, how do you say it? Tezos training kit sponsor.
I wouldn't try, but yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
It was a bit larger, made up for some of that, but the Adidas kit deal is up in a couple of summers' time.
That's right. So we used to be the absolute trailblazers for our kit deals and our sponsorships. And although I think the Chevrolet deal, I don't understand what they thought they were doing. Chevrolet were doing.
Well, they fired the guy. They fired the guy who signed it.
They fired the guy who signed it. But yeah, absolutely. And the other thing, of course, is that there was innovation on the commercial side, clearly under Woodward. That was one of his strengths, and particularly this splitting the market, not just going out for 5 or 6 keys. The PLC, in the PLC days, I remember meeting with the PLC. It's a very firm idea about not diluting the brand. And that sort of makes some intuitive sense, doesn't it? But it was actually wrong. They were like, we don't want more than 5 or 6 key sponsors. And what Woodward agreed or decided was that was completely wrong. And you could have 30, 40. But even so, everyone else can do that now.
Yes.
And you still have to fall back on this thing. Is Manchester United a special brand to be associated with? Of course, it's a special brand in the round that's famous. But do you want to be associated with 6th place, scraping into the Europa League because West Ham couldn't pull it out the bag in the final few games?
I mean, true. And commercial revenue has actually been flat for 6 years, basically, not changed at all 6-7 years now. Which is so that innovation was never they didn't fix the roof while the sun shined on the commercial side of things. Yeah, and broadcast is obviously it's locked in for another 3 years on the Premier League side, and then it's very, very driven by Champions League qualification or not. I mean, last season was kind of weird. Well, so the season just gone, Champions League round of 16 will probably be less money than the season before, which was Champions League group stage plus Europa League final. But it's much of a muchness, right? So Champions League quarterfinal, semi-final is lots more valuable than that. And Liverpool as finalists will make £100 million more than United out of UEFA, something like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the Champions League, it's obviously very unfair in the sense of if you're in it, you get a lot of money. If you're out of it, you get very little money. So it's very unfair in that sense. But it is very performance driven once you get through those group stages. Yes. And I completely agree. I'm also a bit of a skeptic on the next domestic deal as well. There's been this tendency for somebody to come out the woodwork and right back in the day with BT Sports entry at just the right moment, just when things it went through one cycle where the growth on the one deal to the next deal was about 3%, and there's everyone thought that's the peak. And BT Sport come along, and obviously Amazon have come along in a small way and influence that as well. But BT Sport is an interesting business because BT don't really want to be in it anymore.
Well, they're selling it to Discovery,
at least a JV with Discovery, and I get the feeling that you can't rely on that growth anymore. Plus the economy, the UK economy, the world economy is looking quite rocky at the moment. Yeah. So broadcast is hard.
Well, I think that's why they rolled over the Premier League deal.
Yes, that's why they rolled it over there. It was also partly COVID as well because of the uncertainty at that time. But I don't think broadcast income, steady state broadcast income for achieving the same thing is going to grow exponentially over the next 5 or 10 years. So where's the growth? This is why football is a mystery to me. Why are these people buying Chelsea? What do they think the economics of that looks like to pay?
It looks really challenging. I mean, the $2.5 billion purchase price plus all the other commitments that they appear to have had to sign. Yeah.
And that club has structurally run at a loss since Abramovich took it over. That's why they've become the success they are. Are they going to structurally run at a loss? I mean, it sounds, as you say, with that 1.75 billion of additional commitments on top of the 2.5 to redevelop the ground, to continue to invest in the squad. It sounds like they are. So if they are going to put over £4 billion stake here, what level of return are they looking on that, and what time frame? I mean, a normal private equity time frame is 4, 5, 6 years.
Yeah, well, they committed 10.
Yeah, so it's a slow burn, facing all those factors we were talking about before in terms of wage inflation, lack of broadcasting growth, and so on and so forth. So,
well, I figure if I had 4.5 billion that I could, and I know this is a stupidly simplistic way of putting it, and just stuck that in an index fund, I'd be making 9-10% return every year on that. Compound that over your 10 years, and there's quite a significant return that they would need to get in order to just like steady state it.
Right.
Which so it does looks very odd, and I mean, I guess on the broadcast side of things, the hope is that some other player will step in, but it's not obvious that people at Amazon, I know, they feel pretty saturated on the Prime, which is the thing that's really driving revenue for them, because Prime users spend the most money, as well as the Prime business being multiple billion. So can they really drive more subscriptions out of football and content? They've pulled back on Amazon Studios a bit. Apple are playing around with sports here in the US, so they do Friday Night Baseball at the moment, although some analysis I read in the Sports Business Journal said they weren't going to commit to it wholesale.
I mean, obviously, it's a different market, but everything that's happening on Netflix and on the subscription side suggests as well that if you have this inflation problem we've got around the world at the moment, cost of living pressures, then people start trimming back on these things. And Sky to have Sky and BT in the UK, or equivalent packages abroad is something of a luxury item for a lot of people. Not perhaps not for the absolute hardcore, but for a lot of people it is. Or maybe you drop BT and keep Sky, or vice versa. So you've got all those headwinds in the next 2 or 3 years as well. And I can't see a way that pans out well for the clubs.
The new NBC deal here in the States was very lucrative. I mean, it's the biggest market outside of the UK, but I don't know if there's. I mean, they're averaging about 1 million viewers per Premier League game at the moment, which is very good in US terms, but not very much in in global terms. So
So
we've got headwinds on the commercial side of things. They're really going to have to turn the club around in order for the Adidas deal and for the next shirt deal in 3 years' time to be good. Headwinds on the broadcast side of things, we can imagine steady state for a couple of years, then what else is there? There's tickets or player sales.
Yeah, I mean, I think player sales are the one. I saw some guy on Twitter listing about 8 people who should leave the club, not the ones whose contracts have expired, obviously, and said, that's 150 million.
Yeah, I don't see that.
Maybe I don't see it either. But I think sometimes people get a bit fixated with the profit you make on the player. Actually, that's not really where we are this summer. It doesn't matter whether you paid 40 million for somebody yourself for 10, and you book a 30 million, because it's cash, because you'll have amortized, as they call it, that 40 million over the contract life anyway. So they'll be in the books for a lot less than the 40 you signed them for. It's cash, as you say. It's just like anyone could relate to that, aren't they? You got literally hole in your roof, and you go around the house going, Christ, what can I sell to fix the hole in the roof? And it's like, oh well, that old clock on the mantelpiece, that might give me 10 quid. It doesn't matter, I bought it for 50 4 years ago when I was feeling flush. So, but then, I mean, who are the saleable assets? Martial hasn't enhanced his value, has he?
He's had a disastrous time at Sevilla.
A disaster. Wan-Bissaka?
Yeah,
possibly
Wan-Bissaka, Henderson.
Yeah, Henderson's got some value, which I think is a shame because he's a more modern goalkeeper than David De Gea, and he's significantly younger, and it could just be one of those. Understandably, from his point of view, he wants first team football, and I can understand his frustration. But that would be a shame, wouldn't it, to sell him? I think. But there's a list. But what's it going to bring in? Plus, everyone knows we're desperate sellers as well.
Yeah.
Because of course we need to sell not only for that, but also to reduce the wage bill, to allow in the new people who are going to then push the wage bill back up again.
The other route, of course, to increasing revenues, if it's not broadcast, not commercial, not player sales, and not tickets, there's not going to be a lot of appetite for ticket price rises, is to inject equity. Now, obviously, the Glazers aren't going to do that, but Spurs owners, ENIC, have done that. 150 million of extra money flowing into Antonio Conte's pocket for him to spend on players,
and that's what Chelsea's new owners have promised to do. And that's obviously what City and
Newcastle will do.
Newcastle we mentioned, and so yes, and it puts a further disadvantage, doesn't it? Which is even more frustrating when you think not only the Glazers taken these dividends, which is actually a relatively recent thing. It's only been going on for the last 5-6 years.
Yeah.
But also, of course, they've got this magic money tree of converting their 10 votes shares into 1 vote shares.
Yeah,
and then placing those on the stock market every time
one of them
fancies a new condo or yacht or whatever it is they want.
Yeah.
Now, it's harder to. They're less willing to do that. I haven't done that for a while because obviously the share price has been down in the dumps, as we said. But they've been cashing in chunks of United, giving up no control. This is why I sort of retired a bit from football writing about United after the IPO, because that was when they won. That was when they won their battle, because they got, by getting this listing on the New York Stock Exchange and this ability to basically just take some cash. Oh, have 2% of the share capital that's going to be 0.2% of the votes. I mean, amazing. They could sell 90% of the club and still retain voting control.
Which points to, I mean, I guess the last conversation we could have is thinking, is there an end game here? I mean, the Chelsea sale sets a sort of price-ish. I mean, it sets a really interesting. It's a really interesting price, isn't it? Because Chelsea's structurally loss-making. If you're willing to pay £2.5 billion, let's put the future commitment aside. If you're willing to pay £2.5 billion sterling for a club where you're going to struggle to make money, you're going to have to invest more in it. Yeah.
What would you pay for if you want to buy a football club, a preeminent football club? A very famous football club. What would you pay for the most famous football club that should be self-financing? That does make has made 150 million of this famous EBITDA.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because the stock market is not pricing it like that. United's market cap's at $2 billion.
That's right. The stock market, and so this goes back to what I was saying about, if that's why I've got these sort of glimmers of optimism about the Glazers putting the right people in charge, because the stock market is not reflecting the value they would get if they went and sold it.
Yes.
They don't want to sell it, clearly, or else they'd at previous points, and therefore they need to change things, because going back to my magic money tree and passing out the shares, I'm sure they feel they're not getting good value for those shares when they have to sell them at they've sold some at $15, they sell some at 18 and so on. But I'm sure they think it's worth far more than that. Yeah, but it also means, unfortunately, if 2.5 is the benchmark, then for Chelsea, then United's got to be worth.
Yeah, significantly more, you'd think, because of the brand reach and the cash flow positive status that they could get to in post-pandemic recovery. Yeah. Although, sadly, it doesn't seem like they want to cash out. I don't know why not, because if from a purely business point of view, just to take that money, split it between the 6 Glazer children and go invest that somewhere else, they would make more money. So there's something else driving it.
Well, they've put in nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, virtually nothing. Right, even right back to 2005 with their equity, the cash they supposedly put up was a few hundred million. 100 million. They've taken out significantly more than that. So they're in the money already. They appear to have borrowed some money to repay the infamous PICs back in the day, but then obviously they've taken money out that probably repays that money, so they're in for free.
Yeah,
as we say in the world of finance, they're in for free, and anything they take would be upside. So yeah, if they could sell it for £4 billion, would you take £4 billion? I'd take £4 billion.
Yeah, I mean, I would for most things. I guess if I was rich enough to own Manchester United, then maybe I wouldn't, and I'd just do it for the glory. But maybe a better way of thinking about that is if I happened to own the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and I didn't care much about American football or the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and I saw an out, then I'd take the out. But they haven't, and it doesn't seem like they will do.
But I wonder, whether they sadly share some of my red-tinted optimism
Yeah.
that actually they've now realised that you need a coherent vision for the football club that runs all the way through the organisation, and a coach you give time to and integrate into the rest of it, as opposed to the old trick, which was slam a square peg coach into a round peg hole of an organisation. Of which Mourinho is the ultimate example, isn't it? You're not buying a holistic 10-year vision with Mourinho, are you? You're just buying
You mentioned Norcroft's piece. I mean, there's a series of pieces in the Times, Sunday Times, over the past few days, which sort of dissect United's decision-making over the last 10 years or so, which is completely brutal read and well worth it. And of course, all the stuff. I mean, there are a few new anecdotes in there, but mostly we knew. But I'd like to feel as optimistic. Like the solution is the correct structure. United make money. Could be a Liverpool with some kind of incremental thing on top of that, because fundamentally is a bigger club. Sorry,
yes,
Liverpool.
That's right.
And run it smartly, the club will do better on the pitch, and the Glazers can take even more money out because the revenue would keep going up.
But I mean, there should be alignment between the people who own a football club and the supporters. There should be, because essentially you want the same thing. Obviously, they started their ownership the first 10 years or so appallingly badly. No communication, massive ticket price hikes, in particularly in those first 5 years. Again, small reason for optimism is that now we're all in the crap together, aren't we? They're in the crap. Their values very lowly valued by their assets very lowly valued by the stock market. We're all fed up and pissed off because the performance of the pitch is terrible, and our nearest rivals, both in the city and down the road, are doing brilliantly. So we are currently all aligned, and it may be that they've.
It's an interesting way to drive it. Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. Doesn't mean they should take dividends, though. What they should actually be saying is, we're not going to pay a dividend this year because we need to fully reinvest in the football club, physical infrastructure and infrastructure on the pitch.
That would be nice. There is a fan share scheme mooted, which I know I'm hopefully going to talk to Duncan Drasdo from Must about. And I know they're working very hard on what that is, and there is not alignment between fans groups and the club on what that might look like. Funnily enough, I think the proposal was for some fraction of 1% of non-voting shares to be available for fans to purchase, which, you can do anyway by going to the New York Stock Exchange and buying some shares in Manchester United.
Duncan obviously can speak to you in more detail about that. Yeah, I mean, I think the good thing there is that Must are being extremely robust on it. That there is no point giving the Glazers a fig leaf. So look what we've done, and to have affirmation from the biggest and best organised supporters organisation in the country, when it doesn't achieve what it's meant to achieve, and it's a real challenge making it credible, and to make it credible, you have to make it credible to make it big, and you have to make it big to make a difference. So there's no point going down that road at all unless it's right. And well done to Must for standing their ground. I'm perhaps a bit less optimistic on that one, I think.
Yeah, no, it's hard to see much coming out of that, but we'll see by the end of the summer whether any of that has been resolved or not. Anyway, Andy, great talk to you. It's been a while.
Been a long time. No, thanks very much for inviting me, Ed.
We'll touch base on the finances if anything changes in the time to come. I mean, I think seems kind of set for the time being, but
it does. It'll be interesting to see who they buy, how much they spend, where it comes from. Let's hope we're not all starting August with deep disappointment.
Yeah, Zlatan coming on a 5-year contract. All right, thanks, Andy.
On that bombshell, thanks, Ed.
Yeah, bye now.